They've actually had snow. Yes, on March 10th. It's been a chilly one. It's been a bit dull, a bit grim. Bit of snow this morning. Seems to be brightening up now. Hope you're well this Sunday. Hope you've had a nice weekend. My name is Richie Allen. You know that. This is Sunday View. I'm going to look through the front pages of the UK's Sunday newspapers, as well as looking at some of the stories inside as well. And we will hear from some of the main players whom appeared on this morning's television chat shows as well. We'll hear some of that, the political shows as well. It is Sunday View. You can participate as usual by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. That's the Twitter handle. Sunday View it is.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
And I want to say a big shout out, or give a big shout out and say a big hello to Himanshi, who's listening to this program just outside New Delhi in the amazing country of India. It's been a while, Himanshi. Lovely to hear from you. Good morning. Good morning, I said.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes, and her brother Dipanshu as well, who got her into this type of program. All right, Sunday View. I have so much to do. Let's just get rid of the theme tune, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about this morning, even though the Sunday newspapers are dominated, of course, by Brexit. I hear the groans. I know I say this every week, but I actually can hear the groans. I will talk about some of the press coverage of Brexit this morning. Of course I will. But there's plenty of other things to talk about as well. There's been a lot of coverage of the death of the baby of Shamima Begum, this woman who left. Well, she wasn't a woman. She was 15 when she left the UK to go to Syria and join ISIS. Well, her child has died in a refugee camp. There's been a lot of coverage of that. We'll talk about that, you and I. Venezuela as well. And one or two other things besides Brexit. It won't just be Brexit-centric, the Sunday View show today. All right. Loads of tweets coming in already. Good morning. Very good morning to you all. Thanks for tweeting me and participating, because it's all the more fun when you join in with your tuppence worth as well. At least that's how I feel about it. I do genuinely enjoy that. Right, the Sunday Express will kick off with front page. Rotten deal means we'll never leave the EU. That's the headline. And it's about Jacob Rees-Mogg. I can't resist terminological inexactitude, darling. He's in the paper today. He's writing in the paper today talking about May's deal, which, if May's deal is agreed as it is, this will be voted, by the way, on Tuesday. So there will be a vote on Tuesday, okay, on May's deal. As it is, it isn't any different than the deal that was hammered by record numbers when she last brought it before Parliament last month. Mogg is basically saying, if we take this deal, we're never leaving the European Union, right? That's the Sunday Express. Rotten deal means we'll never leave the European Union. You might know this, you might not, but Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of several politicians with their own radio shows these days. I've had quite a bit to say about that. You wouldn't expect any otherwise. You wouldn't expect anything else, would you? I've had a bit to say about the spectre of politicians being given their own radio shows and the multitude of things that are very wrong about that. I'll not get into it here. Look up previous programmes. Oh, free speech. No, it's got nothing to do with free speech. Politicians getting radio shows on national radio stations is not a good thing. If you want, during the week we'll get into this again. I'll explain why in more detail. Anyway, Mogg has his own programme. Here he discusses with a member of the public who phoned in. In theory, you see, they take calls from the public, but believe me, dear listener, the calls are heavily screened. So Mogg discusses with a member of the public this notion, the notion that Theresa May has deliberately negotiated a wretched deal so that Theresa May can then say, well, look, it's either my lousy deal or we stay in or we don't leave. The caller raises this as a possibility. Mogg seems to think that the caller is onto something. Have a listen. Here's the caller, then you'd hear the presenter, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, no, I believe the ERD and the DUP should reject this blackmailing attempt by the Prime Minister. I think this is being a game right from the off, just to get us into the middle of March, to the 11th hour, and basically hold a gun to our heads and say, my way or the highway.
Do you think this has been the strategy all the way along, basically to come up with a pretty rotten deal and then at the last minute say, well, if you don't back it, then we might not leave?
Absolutely. I believe Theresa May is a Remainer at heart. She's always wanted to keep us as close to the EU and the ECJ as close as possible. And I believe the ERG is the only people in the House of Parliament who are representing the people. And I think that the ERG, DUP, should hold firm and reject this deal.
Yeah, the DUP is the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. The ERG is the European Research Group, which is a group of conservatives in Westminster whom are very much in favour of leaving the European Union at the speed of light, and preferably with no deal, just leave, right? Okay. What's happening this week then? Because it can be confusing, even to somebody like me who reads these articles day in, day out. It can be confusing. So what's happening this week? Well, on Tuesday, Theresa May's agreement with the European Union, the deal, will be put back to Parliament. Apparently, she'll be flying into Brussels again tomorrow to beg the EU's negotiators to give her some concessions on this Northern Ireland backstop nonsense, which is a load of old balls. This idea that, we can't have a hard border in Ireland, between Northern Ireland and Ireland, so we've got to put this backstop in, which would temporarily keep the UK in a customs union to avoid that hard border. See, the problem is it isn't temporary. The way it's been written into the agreement that May has made with the European Union is that it isn't temporary. It's basically fairly permanent. And they're not budging on this. Right? Okay, this is the big thing. She's not going to get any new concessions. So on Tuesday, they will vote on May's deal, presuming that Parliament rejects Theresa May's deal again, which it will probably. On Wednesday, they will go and they will vote on no deal. In other words, on Wednesday, there will then be a vote on whether to take no deal off the table, which is lunacy. Of course, everybody understands that, regardless of where they fit on the spectrum, whether they want to stay, whether they want to leave. Taking no deal out of the equation is madness. So presumably then, they do take no deal off the table. Imagine that. You could have this on Wednesday, where Parliament votes and says there can be no deal. There must be some sort of a deal. On Thursday, they will vote again. It's going to be an interesting week. On Thursday, they will then vote on whether to extend Article 50. You with me? I think I've explained that in as basic language as I possibly can. That's the way it's going. The Sunday Telegraph headline on the front page is "Public Swinging Behind No Deal." The Telegraph reports on a Comres poll that finds that 44% of the public now believe that the UK should walk away without a deal if Brussels doesn't make any more concessions. So that's interesting. 44% of the public, according to Comres, says, yeah, okay, if Brussels doesn't offer any concessions on the backstop, we should just get out, wash our hands of it and leave. That's a 6-point increase from a similar poll that was carried out in January. Less than a third of people polled disagreed. So that's interesting, I suppose. This came as 74 senior Tory activists, including more than 50 association chairmen, told May that Conservative voters do not fear a no-deal Brexit and they just want a Brexit, full stop. Steve Baker, who's a senior Brexiteer today, and Nigel Dodds, the DUP's Westminster leader, said today in the Times, wrote in the Times newspaper, that it is now inevitable that the unchanged deal will be voted down on Tuesday, predicting a 3-figure defeat there. So it's all going to collapse this week, really. Former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab told Sophie Ridge on Sky this morning that while leaving with no deal is not his preference, it is better than May's deal and it's better than delaying Brexit. Dominic Raab in conversation briefly with Sophie Ridge.
So you'd prefer it to an extension, would you?
Oh, I think an extension, put it this way, none of the challenges or the problems that we've got now get any better if we extend. And what it will do is embolden those who frankly want to derail and frustrate Brexit. So I think we should keep our promises, frankly, on this. We've legislated, so the default position is that we leave on the 29th of March, preferably with a deal, if not on WTO terms. But if that doesn't happen, I think we should keep the promise that every Conservative made in the manifesto, that no deal was better than a bad deal.
Yeah, pretty much. No deal better than a bad deal. The deal as it stands basically keeps the UK in the European Union. It's what they call Brexit in name only. It's a joke. Andy tweets, Richie, BBC News website asks what we need to know about the upcoming Brexit vote. All Brexiteers need to know is they are being shafted by the establishment, and that includes the BBC. The BBC being part of the establishment, says Andy. Thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate that. David tweets, media, radio, should be hosted by an impartial perspective, not to promote a tainted ideology. Politicians sit down for this one, says David. This is the reality that we've entered in the last couple of years, where national radio stations are giving politicians their own radio programmes and then hiding behind we've balanced it. We've got Labour Party people with their own radio show and we've got Conservative Party people with their own radio show. So what are you complaining about, Richie? Like I said, I've gotten into this before in great detail about how very wrong and very sinister it is to be doing that. Hi to Gail. Good morning, Gail, who's retweeting David Vance, who's been on this programme before. David is a unionist from Northern Ireland. He's an interesting guy. I've had him on before. Like to have him on. The UK voted to leave back in 2016. A deal was not on the ballot paper, tweets David Vance. Theresa May inserted this along with the transition period, along with the £39 billion payment promise, in what can be seen as an attempt to derail leave. I would echo what David Vance says there, even though David and I come from different places when it comes to our politics. No harm in that either. Good morning to Celia Moore. Good morning, Celia. Thanks for tweeting me this morning, folks. I really appreciate it. Ricky as well, to Patrick Vidine. Patrick, on the baby passing away, the child of Shamima Begum, which is a terrible thing, regardless of what you think about her ideology. Patrick tweets, Sajid Javid has no right to revoke British citizenship, and the government has abrogated its responsibilities, and the death of a third child could have been avoided, apparently 2 children that she had previously. You see, this girl has been raped. There's no doubt about this, right? Leave aside for a minute what the UK intelligence, French intelligence and Israeli intelligence have done, because they've created Islamic State, and the Saudis, they've created this head-chopping death cult. It is the creation of Western intelligence, and it has been funded and it has been given oxygen by Western intelligence. This girl was 15 when she made the lunatic decision to go off to Syria and do and live that life. But from the moment she got out there, she was abused by men and possibly women of this head-chopping death cult. She is a British citizen. Look, we'll talk about it in a minute. I'll give you my opinion, but I'm happy to be shot down by you. So give me the contrary opinion. I'll be happy to hear. Good morning to Martin, who's listening in Spain. Good morning, mate. Nice to hear from you today as well. Right, we better move on. It's 14 minutes. It is now past 11. It is Sunday morning, the 10th of March, 2019. You're with Sunday View with Richie Allen. What about the shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer? He was also on with Sophie Ridge too, who asked him, do you want to leave, or is your position now, and the Labour Party position now, that you want to remain? Interesting stuff. Sophie Ridge, Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit Secretary. For our overseas listeners, for every government minister and government secretary of state, there is a shadow counterpart in the main opposition party. Okay. Keir Starmer and Sophie Ridge.
In the spirit of trying to provide clarity, we're talking there about Norway, some of the different deals that could happen if the UK stays in. We're also talking about the idea of a second public vote where presumably Remain will be on the ballot papers. So just to be really, really clear about Labour's position, do you want to leave or not?
Well, we campaign to Remain.
Got to think about this really carefully, Keir, don't you? They've done so many flip-flops on this Labour as a party. He doesn't know what to say.
But when the result came out, we said we accept the result, and then we
decided that we didn't accept the result.
So you want to stay in?
In the 27 manifesto, we said we would trigger Article 50, and we voted to trigger Article 50 in good faith at the beginning of the 2-year period, and said to the Prime Minister, go off and negotiate. At the very beginning, we said, these are the conditions when you come back. We're not going to accept anything you come back with. These are the conditions for accepting your deal. We've now got to the end of the exercise, and we are staring at the same deal with the same red lines, which we reject, or no deal. And it's in those circumstances that the Labour Party has said, against that backdrop, there ought to be a public vote.
Now, Sophie Ridge is nearly falling asleep at this stage.
Vote,
so do you want to stay in or not?
Well, at the moment, we've taken a decision to leave. We've got to
answer the question. Nurse Ratched. She must feel a bit like Charlie Cheswick there. Do you want to stay in now, or are you accepting that we have to leave?
To where we are. If there's a public vote, that would operate as a lock, if you like, on any deal that Theresa May gets through. If that is the position, then, in my view, the default ought to be remain.
The default ought to be remain. Let's ask the public to vote on May's deal, as in yes or no. And if they say no, the default should be to remain. Lovely. I'm not going to say anything more about that. We're on the front page of the Telegraph, aren't we? Also on the front page of the Telegraph, in this era of identity politics and positive discrimination and endless chat about the need for diversity, is this story. Oxford rejects demand answers. It's a very tabloid type headline for the Sunday Telegraph, isn't it? Oxford rejects demand answers. Well, according to the Sunday Telegraph, middle-class Oxford University rejects are increasingly demanding explanations about why they missed out, because they think they are being squeezed out by the university's diversity drive. Every university is on a diversity drive now. They want to get equality in terms of numbers. They want the same amount of people from ethnic minority backgrounds as those from white backgrounds, middle-class backgrounds or whatever. So these diversity drives are meaning that people who might have gotten a place at Oxford in the past are losing out now, and they're kicking off. And in many cases, some of these people, they've got barristers and solicitors for parents. Their mums and dads are barristers and solicitors, and they're not having it. And they're looking at discrimination law and saying, what are you doing, right? So this is interesting. So according to the Sunday Telegraph, Oxford is under more pressure to admit more undergraduates from disadvantaged backgrounds. And colleges have started using contextual data about a student's background to inform tutors' decisions on their application. But students from white middle-class backgrounds who went to a private school or who grew up in a wealthy area do not fit into any of the diversity categories. So as they don't fit in, their applications are being turned down. So they want something that they're calling ultra feedback, right? They want to go right down to the forensic details as to why I was rejected, why I didn't get a place. And this is concerning the universities, because they're fearing now that there might be legal action taken against them for discrimination. I've said this 1,000 times. Discrimination is wrong. Discrimination against somebody because of their background is wrong.